This meeting of the Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies Subcommittee to order. Welcome to the markup of the fiscal year 2023 CJS Appropriations Bill. This is a hybrid markup, so we need to address a few housekeeping matters first. For the members joining virtually, once you start speaking, there is a slight delay before you are displayed on the main screen. Speaking into the microphone activates the camera, displaying the speaker on the main screen. Do not stop your remarks if you do not immediately see the screen switch. If the screen does not change after several seconds, please make sure you are not muted. To minimize background noise and ensure the correct speaker is being displayed, we ask that you remain on mute unless you have sought recognition. I or staff I designate may mute participants' microphones when they are not under recognition to eliminate inadvertent background noise. Members who are virtual are responsible for muting and unmuting themselves. If I notice when you are recognized that you have not unmuted yourself, I will ask the staff to send you a request to unmute yourself. Please then accept that request so you are no longer muted. Finally, House rules require me to remind you that we have set up an email address to which members can send anything they wish to submit in writing at any of our hearings. That email address has been provided in advance to your staff. In a moment, I will talk about the bill itself, but first I'd like to thank my colleague, Mr. Adderholt, for his hard work and collaboration on this bill. Although we don't agree on absolutely everything, I am heartened by the number of matters where we were able to work closely together. I appreciate his cooperation and partnership in helping produce this important legislation, and I count him as a friend. I also want to thank the chair of the full committee, Ms. DeLauro, for all of her leadership and hard work in helping our committee once again to abide by a very ambitious schedule of committee markups as we work to move all 12 appropriations bills. Thank you as well to Ranking Member Granger for the work that she has contributed to all of this. The Commerce, Justice, Science Appropriations Bill we have put forward for fiscal year 2023 will help build a safer, more prosperous, and more competitive America. It includes discretionary spending total of $85.7 billion. This is an increase of $7.6 billion, or 9.7% above the fiscal year 2022 level, in order to fund the wide array of critical programs and activities that fall under this subcommittee's jurisdiction. A top priority in this bill is public safety and efforts to fight crime at the local level. The bill emphasizes assistance to local law enforcement with strong funding increases for cops hiring and burn justice assistance grants, as well as community projects that aim to support public safety in over 200 communities across our nation. With gun violence on all of our minds, the bill provides increases for ATF enforcement and funding for much-needed improvements to the background check system for gun purchases, as well as funding for community violence intervention and prevention efforts, and grants to help implement extreme risk protection orders. The bill also provides a funding increase for grants under the Stop School Violence Act to improve school safety. Also boosted by this bill is funding for programs under the Violence Against Women Act, as well as resources to reduce the appalling backlog of unprocessed rape kits. An increase is provided for victims of Child Abuse Act grants as well. And of course, we provide solid funding for federal law enforcement, including funding for efforts to combat violent crime and cyber criminals, as well as prosecutorial resources to bring to justice those involved in the January 6 crimes at our Capitol. The bill also includes additional funding to reinforce our institutions of democracy and protect the right to vote, as well as to investigate and prosecute domestic terrorism. We address the very troubling problem of hate crimes in our society by providing $117.5 million for grants to help prevent and prosecute them. That amount is more than 5 times the amount provided in FY2022 and includes funding under the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act and Jabara Hire No Hate Act, as well as funding for community-based efforts and a new hate crimes prevention initiative in the juvenile justice account. This bill continues funding for the First Step Act and provides increased funding for federal prison staffing to enhance officer and inmate safety. We also provide substantial resources in this bill to address the opioid epidemic still plaguing our society. Increases are included for grants under the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act and for drug courts and for veterans treatment courts. And in the interest of fundamental fairness, this legislation provides a record high funding of $675 million for the Legal Services Corporation in order to expand fundamental legal services for low-income persons. The legislation further funds numerous initiatives that will advance civil rights and racial justice throughout our country, including funding for improved training for law enforcement officers, as well as funding increases for the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and the Civil Rights Commission. Just as critical is our work to preserve and create jobs in distressed areas, and this bill provides strong funding increases for the Economic Development Administration, the Minority Business Development Agency, and the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program. By providing healthy increases for the International Trade Administration and International Trade Commission, this bill helps create jobs by expanding U.S. exports and fighting the unfair trading practices of other countries. This CJS bill provides full funding for the ongoing work of the National Weather Service to predict extreme heat and other forms of severe weather. I am particularly proud that this bill makes major investments in our ability better to understand and mitigate the real and tangible impacts of climate change by providing strong funding increases for the climate work being conducted by NOAA, the National Science Foundation, and NASA's Earth Science Division. This bill strengthens American technological and scientific competitiveness by providing important funding increases for NSF and NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Further, this subcommittee's commitment to American leadership in space science, space exploration, and aeronautics research is very apparent as the bill before us today provides $25.4 billion for NASA, an increase of more than $1.4 billion above FY22. Finally, I note that funding increases are provided for STEM engagement efforts across this bill's science agencies, many of which are aimed at increasing minority representation in STEM research and STEM careers. In closing, I want to thank all the members of this subcommittee on both sides of the aisle for their very hard work all year long. We can be enormously proud of this bill. The legislation will do a substantial amount of good for the American people, and I urge all members to support it. At this time, I recognize the ranking member, Mr. Adderholt, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Cartwright, and thank you for bringing forth the FY23 Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies Appropriations Bill. And I want to thank you and your staff as well for your hard work that you've done to address the concerns, the priorities for the members on our side of the aisle. And as you mentioned, I have also appreciated your leadership through our hearings this year. And it is finally good to be back in person with the other members of the subcommittee. Let me say there's so many things in this bill that we can agree on. And I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for working with me to ensure that this bill reflects deep concerns about the threats posed by our adversaries. As a nation, we must act to aggressively counter insidious Chinese and Russian ambitions. And with regard to space, we must not assume they're pursuing peaceful goals. This bill funds many NASA programs at a level that will bolster our national security. With the Artemis I mission set to take place this year, I'm pleased that this bill includes $2.6 billion for SLS, including $600 million for Block 1B development. Also want to thank you for including $110 million for NTP. It is clear we need to aggressively fund the development of this technology if we're to outcompete China and land Americans on Mars. In addition, this bill advances scientific research in the areas of quantum computing, artificial intelligence, 5G research, and advanced manufacturing. These things are very essential. The bill also addresses issues impacting all of our communities. It supports critical programs, as you referred to, addressing the opioid epidemic, cutting-edge forensic technologies, helping to eliminate the sexual assault kit backlog, and grants that help improve the investigation and the prosecution of child abuse. Unfortunately, there are some areas which the bill needs some improvement. The bill eliminates a longstanding prohibition on the DOJ paying for abortions, along with four Second Amendment protections that have had historical bipartisan support. It also includes $40 million for a controversial and a poorly defined new program to incentivize the adoption of red flag laws. In addition, there is language laying the groundwork for universal background checks on all ammunition sales. This is an extraordinary assault on the right to keep and bear arms. Moreover, while I'm grateful for the investment this bill makes in advancing tornado research, this is a topic where I firmly believe we can't move fast enough. The Vortex Southeast program, for example, does critical work to better understand environmental factors, improve weather forecast communication, and save lives in my home region, which has unique topography and weather systems. And this is an area where I'd like to work with you to see whether more investment can be made for the coming fiscal year. I'd also like to work with you to do even more to counter Chinese espionage and theft. The agencies funded by this subcommittee must be prepared to deter and contain hostile Chinese endeavors across all fronts. Moreover, though, I remain deeply concerned about the runaway spending that we're seeing from this majority in this administration. The top-line increase of nearly $10 billion and double-digit increases across many of the agencies in this bill are unrealistic and really downright irresponsible. Every American family across the country is feeling the consequences of record inflation. Yet the bill spends tens of millions of dollars on new liberal wish list initiative, and the amount of duplication and overlap in state and local programs is unprecedented. Under state and local enforcement activities alone, there is a net increase of roughly 20 programs. The total number of distinct state and local law enforcement grant programs is now well over 130. That's an increase of more than 40 DOJ grant programs in just over 5 years. For the sake of struggling families, we must reject undisciplined spending and make tough choices to slow the growth of the federal government. Finally, I was disheartened to learn that the Crime Victims Fund has dwindled to an alarming low amount, and I believe we need to preserve that viability of this fund. All that being said, I look forward to working with you, Mr. Chairman, as this process moves forward, and make sure that we can address the issues and improve the bill where we can. Once again, I thank you for your friendship, you and your staff's hard work, and I yield back.
I thank you, Mr. Adderholt. At this time, I recognize overall Chair of Appropriations, Representative Rosa DeLauro.
Thank you, Chairman Cartwright and Ranking Member Adderholt and the members of the subcommittee for your work on this bill. And I also want to thank the subcommittee staff for all of your efforts in getting this bill to us this evening. As our nation continues to recover from the devastation of the pandemic, rising inflation, and the impacts of crime, it is our responsibility to build safer communities and help bolster economic development within them. This bill, building on the achievements in the 2022 government funding package, continues to reverse the decades of underinvestment that have made too many Americans feel unsafe and have pushed working families aside for far too long. I'm especially proud of this bill because the programs and policy within it keep Americans safe. People across the country are worried about their children and families as they go to school, work, or the grocery store. They should not have to be. We are providing resources for the state and local law enforcement agencies who need our support and our respect as they keep our communities safe. The bill includes significant funding increases for the Burn Justice Assistant Grants and the COPS hiring grants. We are also providing strong funding for federal law enforcement to counter the biggest threats to our safety, including domestic terrorism, cyber threats, and civil rights violations. Simultaneously, we provide funding for more effective training for police, as well as for pattern and practice investigations and collaborative reform efforts to not only provide our officers the resources that they need, but also to ensure effective and responsible oversight of policing. The lack of safety, many feel, has only been made worse by the gun violence epidemic impacting nearly every corner of our nation and taking too many people from us every single day and night. Americans are rightfully afraid of these tragedies. Gun violence has now become the leading cause of death among children. This should anger every single one of us into action. This bill addresses the gun violence epidemic by providing full funding for the enforcement efforts of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, as well to improve the National Instant Criminal Background Check System for gun purchasers. The bill also provides funding to help states implement extreme risk protection orders and provide strong increases for Stop School Violence Act grants and for the Community Violence Intervention and Prevention Initiative to prevent gang and gun violence. At the same time, the bill helps ensure our police officers are better prepared to handle violent threats like active shooters. And quite tragically, so much of the violence we are seeing is targeted against women. This bill addresses this with increases for the Violence Against Women Act, programs to support women experiencing sexual assault and domestic violence, strengthening our commitment to protecting those who need us the most. Keeping Americans safe is only the beginning, which is why we must invest in the programs that help make our communities more prosperous and competitive. For that reason, funding under the Department of Commerce will help create good-paying American jobs through investments that empower distressed communities with economic development tools and strengthen small business and American manufacturers. You know, our economy will only reach its full potential when small and medium-sized manufacturers and businesses have access to the business growth opportunities they need and so deserve. I'm proud that this bill provides strong increases to support them. The wide-ranging impact of this bill also increases to support them. The wide-ranging impact of the bill includes funding for programs that help us look toward the future while confronting the climate crisis in force. We are protecting our planet with strong funding for climate resilience and research at NASA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and the National Science Foundation. And in the process, we are supporting the Justice Department's efforts to help combat the climate crisis and advance environmental justice. Our communities need to be, and they need to feel safe. And I am proud of the investments in this bill protect our most vulnerable and their families so we can once and for all help them reach their fullest potential. Again, I thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, and urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back.
Thank you, Chair DeLauro. At this time, I recognize the ranking member of our full committee, Ms. Granger.
Work on the fiscal year 2023 Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies Appropriations Bill. I also want to recognize and thank my friend, the ranking member of the subcommittee, Mr. Adderholt. I know both of you have worked together to address priorities of members on both sides of the aisle. The Commerce, Justice, Science Bill supports initiatives that strengthen the ability of the United States to be competitive around the world, invest in cutting-edge research and technology, and protect children and our communities. It also contains vital funding for NASA, which is critical to maintain our path toward renewed dominance in space. Unfortunately, while this bill funds many important programs, it is based on a funding level that passed the House without Republican support. With inflation at historic levels, we must find ways to reduce spending. Instead, this bill expands the federal government. It provides double-digit percentage increases for many accounts and funds dozens of new programs that have not yet been proven to help our communities. For example, state and local grant programs, many of which do not have bipartisan support, are increased by 22%. Instead, the bill could do more to stop the endless flow of dangerous drugs coming across our southern border. I hope we can work together to get our priorities in the right order as this bill moves through the process. In addition to these spending concerns, there are also some troubling policies proposed in the bill. For example, the bill does not include a long-standing pro-life provision regarding the use of Justice Department funds. It is also very disappointing that language carried for many years to protect Second Amendment rights is removed. In closing, I want to be clear that this is an important bill that we must find a way to get enacted into law. The Commerce, Justice, Science Bill funds agencies that combat criminals, counter illegal drugs, ensure compliance with our trade laws, and enables us to counter China. If votes are needed from members on our side of the aisle to get a bill to the President's desk, changes are going to be required. We'll work to improve this bill as this process moves forward, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
And thank you, Ms. Granger. Are there other members wishing to speak? Hearing none. Does any member wish to offer an amendment at this juncture? Seeing none, I recognize the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Meng, for a motion, and I ask for your support of this bill.
Mr. Chairman, I move to favorably report the Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies Appropriations Act 2023 to the full committee.
The question is on the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. I ask that the members leave the copies of the bills and reports on the dais, and I ask unanimous consent that the staff be permitted to make technical and conforming changes to the bill and report just approved. Seeing no objections, so ordered. Without objection, the meeting is adjourned.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh,
I want to acknowledge the fact that this is probably the quickest hearing that I've been to for Subcommittee. Keep it up.
it was until you started talking.
You lost the record, but I couldn't get the record.
This meeting is adjourned. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you.